Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait for a second as we wait for people to join the meeting. Okay, why don't we start? Hello, and welcome to Rainbow Space Magic, whether this is the first panel you've attended this year or the last one. This is the Writing Trans Joy panel, and I can't think of a better topic to end this weekend with. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. But first, I'm going to start with just a few logistics. To the audience, you're welcome to use the chat to talk to each other, to share recommendations and such in a respectful manner. If you would like to submit a question for the panel, please use the quick Q&A function, which you can find in the toolbar at the bottom of your window, or put a question mark before the question in the chat so that we know that it's a question. Hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions, but just feel free to write them in when you think of them. But after the panel as well, you can continue the conversation in the Discord channel for this panel. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dayna.
Thank you, Monique. I have to say, I'm fairly new to recognizing my transness, my trans identity. So I am incredibly honored to moderate this panel. Yeah, it's just, we have a great group of authors here. Unfortunately, K.S. Murphy was unable to be with us today. We're thinking about you, Kelly, and hope you are soon feeling better. My name is Dayna M. Reidenouer. My pronouns are they, them. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the ancestral homeland of the Conestoga and Susquehannock people. As your publishing BFF, I offer professional line and copy editing, proofreading, book coaching, and ancillary services. I specialize in romance, cozy mystery, and children's books with a penchant for queer, fat, and disabled characters. I'm an active member of the Rainbow Romance chapter of RWA, the LGBTQ Editors Association, and multiple other writing, editing, and fat forward organizations. My special interests right now include fiber arts, horses, cooking, and jigsaw puzzles. But we aren't here to hear me. We're here to hear from these fabulous authors gathered with me. Would you kick us off with an introduction, please, and answer um, what is trans joy? How do you convey it in your writing? And even more than that, like what brought you to this panel?
Yes, thank you. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm M. I'm trans non-binary, they, them pronouns. I acknowledge that my home occupies the physical, traditional, and ancestral lands of the Illiniwek Mississippian tribes, including the Cahokia and Tamaroi. Through this land acknowledgement, I remind us all of the legacy of colonialism and diaspora. I express gratitude to the indigenous peoples of this land. So I write trans and non-binary lesbian fiction across genres, and I have a podcast called Galaxy Moth Queer Books, in which I interview other LGBTQ plus authors. And, I say right now, but really in general, for me, trans joy is being able to be embodied as a trans person in the world and to take up space and be in community with a diversity of other trans persons and to do so in ways that feel good and bring pleasure and even euphoria. Like pleasure, fun, those things are have become even more important to me over the years. And I want it to be even more than that basic just being able to be embodied. Like that's the the least any of us could ask for, right? And so I want to be able to reach for that next level of what joy could be and have prolonged contentment and deep happiness and be able to live in that happiness for everyone. And so I try to convey that in my writing, specifically through a trans and non-binary lens. And I'm at this panel because, as a trans person, I'm working on making trans joy my own reality. So this is like a work in progress, nurturing myself and my mental health. And, I'm doing that at a time when very few people outside of the wider LGBTQ plus community are contributing in any way to trans anything positive, let alone trans joy. And as we all know, those in power are working actively against it. And so I really need trans joy to be central in my life so that I can stay alive, that my wife, who is a binary trans woman, and I can do more than just survive and do more than just outlive and be able to like, I think in therapy terms of like reaching for the next uh best layer of emotion that you can reach. That's what I'm desperately trying to do in my own life. And so, I'm here because I want trans joy in my life and I want to see other trans people experience it. And seeing other trans people experience it brings me even more joy. So that's what I want.
Wonderful. It's like a cyclical, self-fulfilling prophecy,
A
what of
joy
sort.
cyclone, let's say.
Oh, joy cyclone. I love that. I love that. Um, Morgan, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Morgan. I write as S. Morgan Burbank, so you'll probably hear both names used interchangeably here. I reside on what is historically lands of the Erie and Wyandot peoples. Just since people were sharing that, probably not a bad thing to do so myself as well. I'm a writer whose writing particularly focuses on topics of mental health, sexuality, love, and relationships. Historically, I've told things primarily through sci-fi, dystopia, usually sapphic stories, though you guys are going to be first to hear this. I have a book that I am announcing later tonight that will be my first truly trans story, because much like was said, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily new to realizing I'm trans, but there's a difference between new to realizing it and new to being openly out with it, which has been something that has been new for me over the last 18 months, give or take. And so, um, you know, that's a little bit about who I am. And I think that ties into trans joy and conveying it in writing. I am a trans feminine person, and I share that not necessarily because I think that you need to know what someone was before they came out as trans to have an understanding of them after, but for sake of giving context to like what trans joy means to me. My best friend, who I've known for years, knew me before I came out, and in our discussion, she is also a writer. I look up to her very greatly because of the impact she's had on my mental health and the impact that she has had on me as a writer. And one of the first things that she shared with me upon seeing my writing for the first time before, I had fully come out was, it felt like you write women very well for someone who does not identify as one. And little did I know, here we are, guys, 12 years after that initial discussion. And, I think the way I view trans joy is very much in a microcosm tied up in that discussion, because it is not explicitly like what somebody used to identify as, what somebody explicitly identifies as by itself. It is the experience of the person who is living that life. And, whether that's as subtle as not realizing that every character that's led in a story you've written for 15 years has been female before you come to realize you are, or whether that's, just having moments of finding that joy in being a conduit for others to experience, trans writing, sapphic writing, whatever it is for the first time. That's great. Out of here. Out. Sorry, small children opening my door and charging in.
Hey, it happens.
Yes, but he wasn't wearing pants, so.
Oh, okay, yes. The blur feature is working well on your background, so yes. Um, okay, I'm guessing Morgan is finished. Alyssa, last but not least, please introduce yourself and tell us about your
Sure.
experience of trans joy.
Okay. I'm gonna have a very different answer because I'm a very different person. And that's fine because I love diversity in all shapes and forms. Okay. I'm Alyssa Askani, she, her pronouns. I like to call myself Rider of Ethereal Darkness because I'm so mean and kick my characters around. I beat the crap out of them emotionally and physically, and then I do it more, and then they find a glimmer of hope. So it's worth it. I just be on the path of doing it. Written previously, additionally, however you want to phrase it, as legendary. My next book will have both names inside, but on the cover it just says Alyssa Ascani, so that's pretty cool in my book. Um, no pun intended on that. Okay, trans joy. So I am probably baby trans compared to a lot here, but that's okay because there's no timer on that. Um, I'm a little more than 2 years past. Oh wow, yeah, I actually am. Um, I actually here I'm gonna make myself disappear because I think it will show the cover of my book. No, it won't. Okay, it doesn't. So I tried. My most recent book, until a week from now, is I like to call it Dune for trans girls. It's called Loyalty of Severus, um, space opera, trans lead, not all trans characters, trans women in the society have an interesting kind of hyper mentality role. Um, and I just thought that was cool. I wrote the sequel to that book. So I had to finish the first draft of the sequel. And then I'm like, why is this so weird? Because I felt like it was my way to deal with it, be gone with it. And I'm like, wait, no, 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 this is wrong. I'm supposed to enjoy this. Well, if I enjoy this, that means, am I? And I was like, I asked some trans friends, like, does this my, tell me I'm wrong. And I'm like, no, sweetie, you finally figured it out. The egg is cracked. Congratulations, you're you now. Just kind of fun. Um, yeah, I get to do all sorts of weird things. And the more I have embraced my transness, the more I have done better professionally, which is a really cool thing. Um, I went from being, oh, I occasionally get a book out. People sometimes give me the time of day. I now developmental edit books, and I'm about to release another book. And I've been working just for me since December. Crazy. So the doorway of trans joy for me, I won't say necessarily the full experience, but the doorway is the realization that you, as you truly see yourself, is worth it.
Wow. So then, a slight follow-up then is, do you find your books, and this could be for all of you, like, do you find your books are sort of self-insertion, or do you just find your books as a way of, they just happen to reflect your reality?
Okay, I will definitely take that up because that feeds into more. So book two, the one that cracked my egg, has a character in it that's just introduced in that book and will be in more. And her name is Alyssa. She has to play ball with all the things of society that's around her. She has to do things this way and that way. She tries to get on board with the programs of society. Um, so she's a product of her society. And it was very much that series was designed to be my way to deal with it. So by me pushing that button even further, yeah, I know the solution to deal with it is just be you, honey. Don't just me.
Or Morgan, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I've always struggled with the idea of self-inserting in stories. I think that's partly because I did not start out intending to be a writer. I wrote because I couldn't afford therapy. And that was what the therapist told me. Here is a suggestion to help process your emotions. 19, 20-year-old me, whatever age I was at the time, ran with that. And what that caused me to do is it caused me to struggle with the idea of self-inserting because it felt too much like that therapy writing to me. which has its value, has its benefit, has helped me a lot. But from a fiction standpoint, that's not what I'm looking to convey. With that said, you can still use writing to process emotions, to address topics that are close to your heart, whatever it may be, without self-inserting. I think that's what more of what I tried to do rather than explicitly self-inserting. Just because I have a therapist for a reason. She's very nice. I don't want my readers to turn into my therapists.
Yeah, I imagine that readers and authors already have fraught relationships, adding that level of therapy.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, that would be super, super hard.
I don't need to trauma dump on all of you. You've got enough to do in your lives.
Right. But do you see dark books as and tortured characters as a form of trauma dumping?
Not necessarily. And again, I write dystopia. I grew up, and I'm so mad about this entire concept right now, but not a here problem. I grew up, I loved 1984. I loved Animal Farm, Feed by M.T. Anderson. Like, dystopia was what was entertaining to me and like fascinating. And then we lived in one, and I don't like that. It is very hard to be a dystopia writer right now. And I want to be. Like, I want to write the style of book that made me want to read as a kid. Like, teen, whatever. Um, I don't think it's necessarily trauma dumping in the sense that, like, readers who are getting into dystopia, grim, dark fantasy, dark sci-fi tend to know that there is something coming. Ideally, the author has content warnings in some capacity, be it very detailed ones, be that broad ones, whatever it may be. And I think that helps that. But putting that aside, in most cases, if I am writing something, I'm not doing it explicitly to call out a trauma. A character may experience a trauma. That may be a fact of their story, a fact of their life. It's about how it is responded to, how they process through it, whatever it may be, that I think makes for the more interesting story, not explicitly that, oh, hey, X person experienced Y trauma.
Now, some of you might be thinking of why are we talking about trauma and darkness? But in our pre-session discussion the other night, we talked about how darkness really emphasizes the light. And so we felt like dark experiences for your characters provides room, provides contrast for the joy. So, if you wanted to talk about this a little bit, do you create darkness for your characters and so that the joy seems even more joyful? And if so, how do you protect your mental health while doing that? Because some things can get pretty dark.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to give like a very non-binary answer to it's like all of my life is very non-binary. But all joking aside, I've come to this philosophy of life in which, I really deeply believe life can be different than it is for everyone, and that it can be, happy and peaceful and loving, and that there will always still be natural suffering, like getting sick, having someone die, losing something that you really like, things like that, right? There's natural suffering, that there's never going to be an absence of that, but that each of us should seek to intentionally not create additional suffering for ourselves or one another. And that's a philosophy that, I've developed for my own life and that shows up in my writing. And so, I see that in my writing, characters experience what I would call that natural suffering, like someone dies. but they're trying to cultivate lives with more individual happiness that that they experience individually and with our community. And so, like I have a horror novel called The Poison Fruits, and that is the full-length novel that I have out. And in that novel, there are horror elements. There are, some scary things that happen, and the characters are wondering. It's about queer metal bands, and the main character Izzy is in a band with her ex-girlfriend Jilly, and they're playing a show, and someone dies during the show, and the question is kind of like, is did this person were they killed by a human, or did something supernatural happen? And the people in the bands are really the only ones that kind of think that this might be the case. And so they're kind of struggling with like, are we being haunted by something, or are we being haunted like by the trauma, like the psychological? And it's not explicit on the page like that they are realizing they're going through trauma, but they're discussing it, right? Because death is really traumatic, even if it is not like what I call natural suffering. Like, however someone dies, it can be very traumatic for people. And, so there are things that happen in that book, like the death. There's a eviction from an apartment. There's police being, you know, ACAB. There's bad luck happening in the story. But I feel like I can't I can't take it too far. Like when I was a lot younger, I wrote a few other horror novels that were super intense. And at this point in my life, I just can't do that. Like for my, it's just no longer a part of my mental health journey to kind of process things through it, which it was earlier. So, however other people do it, I totally get it. But when I wrote the Poison Fruits first over 10 years ago, and then I came back to it last year to start editing, and I grappled with how much I had changed as a person, and, kind of really dialed back how much was happening to the characters. And so, even with that happening, the joy comes in that there's this tragic death, but there's still what readers have said is a very sweet and satisfying love story. There's a really satisfying, sweet coming out of a trans woman. There's no transphobia. It's important for me to have happy moments and a happy ending in my writing because I need that in my own life. So I want to convey that. And other people might find joy from a much grimmer story, but for me, I want to see the queer characters be happy at the end and be alive. So,
Love that. Um, so we've kind of talked about like dark genres. Because I am a very sensitive person, I can't do like horror disturbs me. I stick to the light and fluffy for the most part. And no, I'm not shaming, like fluffy is good in this sense. For me anyways. So do dark stories have joy in them? All right, Alyssa, you want to take you're muted if you want to answer that.
I was being quiet. I didn't actually verbally say it. I just fully agree. But yeah, I mean, I
Oh, okay. Sorry.
it's like I said with my intro was my label that I give myself, writer of ethereal darkness, not because I'm trying to say you should be depressed, but I'm going to show you dark things so I can also show you the way out. And that that's important. I don't care if somebody's trans or if somebody's anything. No matter who they are, somebody can get something from that. So yeah, dark stories have to have some kind of joy, because if it's just a joyless slog, I want nothing to do with it. But again, I'm the one who's kicking the characters around a lot. I'm the person who, when asked, "Oh, which of your characters do you want to meet in real life?" I say none of them because they'll all want to kill me. Uh, this is a big point for me, is because people wonder what the appeal of anything grimdark is, what the appeal of horror, as was wonderfully mentioned in the chat. Um, it's sometimes we have to face our demons in whatever way. It could be society's demons, it could be our internal demons, or easy enough, both. And that's how we find the way to cope with them, if not rise above them. So I feel that that's a broader spectrum thing. I mean, still have a banner going around, boy mode me on it, because the QR code and the messaging behind it still works. So that's the same thing, is that transcends just the trans joy experience. But if we could do like M said, is that if we can find those stories where, hey, us trans people, we get to take the lead a little bit. We get to show our everybody is like, hey, here's a cool story, and we're in it. And with a star of it even, and they like it, then we win. I mean, that's again, I love the diversity of the world, and I love being able to show more of it all. I'll let somebody else talk.
Morgan or would you like to comment on this? Okay. So we kind of touched on this with this question. Genre, how much does genre affect or impact the presentation of trans joy? Do you think trans joy looks different because of genre expectation, genre conventions or reader expectations? Like, trans joy in a like an romance versus trans joy in a dystopian grimdark. Do you think they look different? And how?
I don't know that it is explicitly that trans joy looks different per genre. I think joy, full stop, looks different per genre. And the reason I say that is because although in many cases when trans joy is written in books, it is written by trans individuals, and therefore we are likely depicting trans joy in ways that are fulfilling, for lack of a better term, to us. I think that is going to differ with genre, whether we are showing trans joy specifically or just the joy for individual characters. Like, you can have romance stories that have conflict in them. You can have dystopia that has conflict in them. And it's probably not an entire war in a romance story, whereas it could be in dystopia. Same level of economies of scale in this case, but for joy. So the genre does dictate, but I don't think that's explicitly a trans issue. What I think it does do is that each individual genre allows authors who write trans characters, be they trans or not, to play with the conventions in a little bit different manner, to subvert expectations for what is a traditional joy moment, joy scene, and to fulfill it in such a way that it becomes trans joy within the elements and within the framework of their genres.
You look like you're pondering something. Would you like to share?
Yeah, so I write a lot of different genres, but there's a through line of romance and sensuality of some kind. And so the joy that I write across genres really has to do with what I spoke about earlier, embodiment, but then also relationships. So a relationship with yourself and a relationship with other people. And embodiment is something that, you know, has been a struggle for me through my life. Like being in a body that is not recognized by all these people around you, and the way that internally makes sense to you and is not making sense how other people treat you. And so to me, I have characters that, regardless of the genre, are experiencing joy by being who they are and living in their bodies, whatever their bodies may shape might be. And so like in the horror romance, The Poison Fruits, there's joy in the characters building a relationship with uh you know, this new person, with her coming out, but also trying to heal a relationship with their ex-girlfriend and their ex-girlfriend's current girlfriend, and all like the drama that's involved in that. And can these people all get along because hey, somebody died at our show, at our last show, so what are we doing here? And you know, then I have other writing that I do that's it's very erotic. So I have an erotic novelette series called Love in Transition, and that is about a late bloomer trans woman and a late bloomer cis lesbian experiencing this consensual erotic self-discovery as a path to loving themselves as individuals, regardless of external relationships, and also as a path to embodiment and joy. And so, you know, there's just so much with embodiment and joy that is in my work. And then I have another erotic novelette series called Mummy May I, which is about a non-binary anthropologist in the 26th century who discovers what everyone else believes to be a mythical civilization from the 22nd century is real, and along the way meets an undead trans woman. And guess what? They have erotic, consensual there's always consent in everything I write.
Amazing
Self-discovery,
series
right?
concept, by the way.
Thank you. And it's all like embodiment, embodiment, embodiment. And then right now I'm currently working on Our Crystal Shop, my next full-length novel that I'm going to publish. It takes place in a queer normative fantasy world. It's a romantasy. They worship in this world a non-binary goddess, and there's a trans woman lead, a non-binary lead, and it's cozy joy, but cozy erotic too. And how those two you know, work together. So whether you see the erotic part as symbolic and you do like a deeper reading lit crit analysis of it, or where you just take it at face value that, you know, like being able to have sex as a trans person is great and let's celebrate it. So however you want to take it, you know, that's really for me in horror, sci-fi, and fantasy, embodiment and joy and the erotic are all tied together. So
Awesome. Molly has a great question here in the chat. What distinguishes trans joy from other kinds of joy? Is it that trans people are the ones experiencing it? And does it relate to specifically trans issues like the embodiment issues that had been talking about? This question's open to anyone. Molly, I
Okay.
think you
I'm
stumped him.
no, I had to take a minute. I'm trying not to be negative Nancy here. Okay. I don't think that joy really has a label. I think that there are things that are more noticeable from a trans perspective when it comes to joy. Um, you know, you see, years ago there was a line in Dresden Files books about how a emotional vampire could feed off of a woman because she was getting her hair done. That seems like okay, that seems reasonable. Now, will be there more or less joy there if it's a trans woman? I think it's more measured on, I didn't get to do this before. Oh, this is so cute. That kind of thing. Also, I want to bring up two other things real quick since we are writers here, let's talk about our influences and our backgrounds. So let's talk about um, one of the biggest, especially looking back at it, movies that super duper ultra, the more you think about it, the more you realize it transcoded, is The Matrix. Yeah, we didn't realize when that movie came out that that was written. It says Wachowski brothers on it. No, 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 no. It says Wachowskis now because they're both trans women. There's so much transcoding on that. It is. People have written books about it. So, not me. I don't get that paycheck, but those books have been written because there is an exploration that can be gone through that anybody can relate to. But again, it gets to be more punctuated, more presented widely because it's from a trans perspective, even if it's a closeted trans perspective like The Matrix. Whereas a lot of the nuanced rules that we're hiding with uh, that got to be more assertive when they put out the fourth Matrix movie. Uh, some of it too, we make these social notes because there's so much pressure against us these days. Well, starting with I can't remember if it's the second or third Wizard of Oz book, sequels to Wizard of Oz. Yeah, the person who's in charge of Oz is Ozma, and when Ozma is introduced, there's an entire book of here's this boy, and we're looking for this queen. Boy is the queen. So I'm like, sure, I'll do that. But it it's presented as, oh yeah, you didn't know. Okay, you didn't know. Sometimes we just have to experience, a joy. A simple bright thing looks a lot more magnified in the dark compared to in the light, and that is just a further exploration of that notion.
Yeah, and that's kind of brought us almost full circle to where we started talking about like the grim dark and the horror and the trauma and um you know that's really fascinating. Um so we have 12 minutes left. It's really kind of interesting to me that the questions we had come up with have all been hit on at one point or another throughout the conference. Like talking about, is writing trans characters, is it a character trait or a plot point? And then we talked about political climate and current events. And um, then we talked about well, I guess we didn't talk about the struggle versus joy. We just talked about it now. Um, talk about like own voices and encouraging more people to write about trans characters. Um, I am a huge fan of representation and inclusion, but I know that I have seen people who are not part of the community write terribly about when they've tried to be inclusive. Um, do you think trans stories should be restricted to trans authors? And why or why not?
I'm going to say a hard no on that solely because had I not been writing trans stories, I would not have realized I was trans. Um, like, don't get me wrong. I think a major reason that I came to that realization was because of the process I go through in writing my stories. Um, I've won one award ever as an author, and it was in 2021 when my first book won the Queer Indie Award for Best Dystopian Novel. And I won that award. I was not out to anyone at that point. I think other than my therapist might have known at that point, and my best friend might have known. I think that was it. And I'm not even positive on the best friend just because of the timing of that. But like, really struggled. Like, on one hand, it was like, yay, somebody likes my writing well enough to say, hey, this is good enough for an award. Please take this award. I asked if there was money involved. There's not. That's not the point. But the that part of me was very happy, very excited for myself as a writer. But another part of me was like, hey, this feels wrong in the sense that, like, yes, I did a good job of depicting a queer lesbian relationship in this story and doing so in a manner that was told a good dystopic story, told a good scientific or science fi story. But like, it's like, me still not fully comprehending what I was going through myself. It's like, well, that doesn't make me queer. That doesn't make me trans. It doesn't make me any of those things that, like, it took more researching and learning and more digging into stuff for the sequel to that book, for other stuff I was working on, that, like, I don't think I would have gotten to that point certainly as quickly as I did. And I wouldn't call it quick because I was 34 when it happened. But still, I don't think I would have gotten to that point as quickly as I did were it not for the writing and the research I had to do during writing. And if you completely eliminate the possibility of somebody who is not part of a group writing, that identity, or isn't actively out, you're either A, discouraging people from learning about themselves, or B, forcing people to out themselves when they should not have to. And I struggle with both those things just as a human, independent of being a writer. Sorry, soapbox over.
No, that's an excellent point. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on or hopes for the future for, writers who are coming up now or writers who will be coming up. Like, what do you hope that future generations of writers, and I'm believing that they exist, um, how will they portray trans joy? How will they portray trans characters, trans stories? Like, what are your hopes and your dreams for where, you know, trans representation can go? I mean, this is a super broad question, so take it however you'd like.
Yeah, so my hope is that those of us writing now are giving people, cis people, trans people, the ability through our stories to imagine something different for all of our present lives and for the future. And then that, that makes a difference. I want to see stories about trans people experiencing love and pleasure and being a normative part of worlds that are based on reality or fantasy worlds, so that in the future it's completely ordinary to have trans characters, but also still celebrated and sacred to those who need to see those stories to know who they are. Because I don't think the process of self-discovery is going to go away. At any time, I think that's just part of the human experience, as discovering who you are. And humans are a species of storytellers. There have been gender nonconforming stories that we might call trans today, although we don't know how the original authors would identify them throughout history, including in ancient religions. And those have all gotten sidetracked or turned into moralisms or rewritten by cishet patriarchy in some way, right? So we need to not be forgotten. And so let's just flood as many trans stories out there. If you are a cis writer, get a sensitivity reader and just go beyond merely existing and merely being represented, but being like that embodiment, seeing yourself and the people around you reflected in stories, because that's so essential to the human experience across time. So.
Wonderful. Alyssa, since you work as a developmental editor, and we have just a couple minutes left, can you give us any tips from a dev editor's point of view, like how to write trans joy better? I mean, can it be distilled down into like a minute or no?
Oh, I can make it as wide or as long as you want. Let's just go with the quick answer of be consistent, be honest, be fair. Everyone is driven by the same core set of emotions because we are driven by the same core set of chemicals. Just because I'm trying to reduce my testosterone does not mean I can go without it. It's a big thing to make sure that you have a relatable position, and the more relatable and understandable your characters and your setting are, the better off you and your story will always be. And if you can just take that to the next level, if you have a trans character, when that trans character experiences internal joy or external joy, especially the internal, that's when you find trans joy.
Fabulous. Do we have a question in the chat here, and that is, do any of you do sensitivity or authenticity reading? And if so, how do you prefer to be contacted?
I don't do sensitivity reading explicitly for being trans, but it's something that's on my radar to add. I do dev editing services like Alyssa does. So, what I will say, find somebody who does do it and please utilize them. Sensitivity readers are the best thing. Like, full stop. Please use it.
Yes, and expect to pay them. Expect to compensate them well. They are taking on an emotional labor.
We like money.
We need money.
Hey, I want to add a little bit to that, because when I wrote Loyalty of Severus, I got a sensitivity reader, October K. Santorelli, fantastic trans author. He writes young adult, and he said later on after I came out to it, this was like a good 2 years removed from this conversation. He said that he sat there reading that book the whole time, saying, "She'll figure it out."
That's hilarious. Do you do sensitivity reading or offer any editorial services?
Okay, so this is a funny question because I have an MA in English Lit and I taught college writing, and I actually worked as a side job as a writing coach where I use strength-based coaching to help, because I'm very, if you can't tell, I like to err on the more like go to your strengths and positivity side because of how hard so much of life is. And so I had done that for many years. I don't currently do that, but I would be open to it for trans and non-binary authors doing editing work. And I could be open to doing sensitivity reading. Yeah, so I would consider it.
Fabulous. And I saw you dropped your info in the chat. Make sure you put that in the Discord server. Morgan and Alyssa, if you'd like to also make sure you put your info in the server as well. Do we have any last
Gladly.
thoughts from any of you? You've kind of been quiet. I want to give you the chance to maybe, do you have something to say to wrap everything up?
Were you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh.
If not, that's okay. I can ask Morgan or Alyssa or
I would just say that again, I just really heavily encourage you if you are a trans non-binary trans author of any kind to just start writing, because You know, I've been writing for 30 years. I'm in my 40s. I've written 5 novels and I just have one out because I struggled with like ever wanting to be the center of attention. And then I went through diagnosis process, found out I was autistic. And then I've been working through that in order to actually publish. And it's other trans writers that gave me the courage to do that, like seeing their writing and being like, okay, I can have a little bit of attention on me. And look at me now, I'm on a panel. And luckily, I can't see the audience. So it's only us. But, you know, I feel like now is the time. Like, you know, trans joy in writing can be an act of rebellion. And I think it's super important to do that. And that's really keeping me on this mortal coil, if you will, is being in community with other writers. So please share your writing, take up space in the world.
Thank you to all three of you. This has been an absolute delight. This has been joyful event. Thank you so much. Monica, Monique, rather.
Thank you. Thank you all again for this great panel. It was really so nice and just a great conversation, and I really enjoyed the entire thing. So thank you all so very much for that. And I also want to thank everybody who's attended this panel and this weekend. We could not do this without all of you, everyone who has taken the time out of their weekend to attend, all of these amazing panelists who have given their time both ahead of the con and over the last 2 days. And I also want to mention the RSM planning team, who do not get nearly enough attention, but have been meeting and working on this for months to get this done. Angie and Genevieve and Heather and Tanya and Tucker and Dayna, who helped with the Zoom tech this weekend as well. Thank you all so much. This just could not happen without everyone's efforts, and I am truly appreciative of all of it. The Discord is still open and will continue to be, so please continue to use it. You know, go and talk more about this panel, about queer joy, about trans joy. The other panels, the recordings for everything up until this panel are already on YouTube and linked in the Discord. So I'll get this one up in a little bit. But anyway, my deep thanks again, and we'll see you all next year. So thank you all. Bye-bye.